29 CFR 1910, General Industry Standards. These are the rules from the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. I have to acknowledge the company I'm getting these rules from, called Mancom. They provided me with the information. They're good at resource and industry. They have a good website, and they provide standards for just about everything OSHA puts out. We're over here interested in 1910, which is General Industry Standards. General Industry Standards breaks down into a lot of these different topics. You have general information, application and extension of established standards, walking, working surfaces, exit routes, powered platforms, man lifts, vehicle mounted work platforms, health, environmental controls, hazardous materials. You have personal protective equipment in Subpart I. We're going to get into that one. Subpart I. General environmental controls, medical and first aid, fire protection, compressed gas and air, material handling, storage, machinery and guarding, hand and portable power tools, welding, cutting, brazing, special industries. This is where you find the rules for high voltage, generation, transmission, distribution. You have Subpart S is electrical. You have commercial diving, toxic and hazardous substances. You might recognize a lot of these titles as they apply to most facilities and most of those titles. But being this is electrical training, we go to electrical, Subpart S. Now we look at Subpart S, starting out with introduction, then we go to utilization systems, general, wiring design, protection, wiring methods, components, equipment for general use, specific purpose equipment, hazardous locations, special systems. Some of those titles might ring a bell because those are actually chapters in the National Electrical Code, or NEC. Back in the 70s, the NEC was rewritten to become a compliance document with this section of OSHA. So if you follow National Electrical Code standards, you are now OSHA compliant for installation. But we're not talking about that one right here. We're going into electrical safety. So we got to jump over here to 331, scope, 332 is training, 333, selection and use of practices, 334 is use of equipment, 335 is safeguards for personnel protection. These are all the OSHA rules. So we go over here to 331. Covered work by both qualified and unqualified persons. Covered work by both qualified and unqualified persons. The provisions of 1910, 331 to 335 cover electrical safety related work practices for both qualified persons, those who have training in avoiding the electrical hazards of working on or near exposed energized parts, and unqualified persons, those with little or no such training working on, near, or with the following installations. So at this point right here, anybody exposed to electrical is covered by these standards. Doesn't matter what the occupation is. Electricians, maintenance, linemen, manufacturing, doesn't matter. You so much as going to work in the morning and turn on a light switch or plug something in the wall, you're covered by the standard. And it goes on to the list that includes just about all occupations you can imagine. 1910, 332 goes into training. Training requirements contained in this section apply to employees who face a risk of shock that is not reduced to a safe level by the electrical installation requirements of 1910, 303 to 308. Right here it's going to installation requirements. These sections are referring to this section of OSHA, which is interpreted by the National Electrical Code. So they simple it up. If the area you work in complies with NEC, it's considered safe. If your area you work in does not comply with NEC, it is considered as unsafe. Now, the training itself is listed down here. Okay, some people got to be trained to higher levels. Qualified person, a larger amount of training. Unqualified person, minimal amount of training. But there are minimal amounts of training. Now, occupations that require more training more frequently are going to be listed here. Blue-collar supervisors, electrical, electronic engineers, electrical, electronic equipment assemblers, electrical, electronic technicians, electricians, industrial machine operators, material handling equipment operators, mechanics, repairers, painters, riggers, roustabouts, stationary engineers, welders. These all are going to require a greater amount of training due to their occupational hazards. Section 333 is going to be the selection and use of work practices. Safety-related work practices shall be employed to prevent shock or other injuries resulting from either direct or indirect electrical contacts when work is performed near or on equipment or circuits which are or may be energized. The specific safety-related work practices shall be consistent with the nature and the extent of the associated electrical hazards. This section of OSHA goes quite in depth to work practices. This is where you find things like lockout, tagout, minimum approach distances, the use of signage, the use of PPE. This gets all into common work practices used throughout industry today. 334 is use of equipment. This gets into portable plug-connected equipment, portable electrical equipment. Paragraph applies to the use of cord and protected equipment, cord plug connected equipment, including flexible cord sets, extension cords. Well, this section is kind of simple. It just tells you to take care of the employer's tools. You don't throw the tools around, you don't kick them around, you don't pull them by the cords, lift them by the cords. You don't use extension cords as ropes, you don't run extension cords through doorways and windows. All this does is protects you by protecting the employer's tools. Take care of the tools, guys. 335 right there, this opens a can of worms. Opens a can of worms. Use of protective equipment. Personal protective equipment. Employees working in areas where there are potential electrical hazards shall be provided with and shall use electrical protective equipment that is appropriate for the specific parts of the body protected and for the work to be done. Right here, shall be provided with and shall use. The employer will provide, the employee will use. Well, it's pretty straightforward. All PPE provided by the employer, but once the employer provides the PPE, the employee has every responsibility to use the PPE. It's a two-way street. Now, let me also point out that there's not one word anywhere within OSHA that says this has to be your personal protective equipment. The term personal does not mean your property. It means it covers the person. The only requirement there is that the employer has to provide. If the employer provides, the employee uses. But there are regulations that says, and we're going to read this, that the PPE has to fit the employee. And it has to be maintained in a clean and sanitary condition. So PPE, guys. We can go on for days working on talking about PPE and talking about these OSHA rules. But we're going to move on to the document NFPA 70E, which is an interpretation of the OSHA rules, the OSHA document.